The fluorescent lights of the 24-hour print shop usually hummed with a comforting mechanical rhythm, the steady chunk-chunk swish of collators, and the sharp scent of hot toner. But at 2:14 in the morning, that peace was shattered by a vibration on my wrist that felt less like a notification and more like a violation. It was a priority override. My father. I hadn't heard his voice in 2 years, yet here he was, bypassing my do not disturb settings with a demand that felt like a subpoena. I looked down at the glowing screen, my pulse holding steady in a way that surprised me. "Mom's surgery is Tuesday," the text read, stark and unfeeling. "We fired the nurse to cut costs. You're coming home to handle it. Quit your little hobby job. Be here by Monday." There was no hello. No question. Just an order to a ghost he thought he still owned. Before I tell you what I did next, drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is right now. I want to see who's awake with me. I stared at the screen until the pixels started to blur, but the words didn't change. The old Emily, the one who spent 18 years apologizing for taking up space, would have hyperventilated. She would have calculated how fast she could pack a bag and how many apologies she would need to offer for not arriving sooner. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I was a technician of copy machines and a binder of legal documents, and right now, the only thing jamming was my father's attempt at control. Brenda, my manager, slid a fresh ream of paper into the heavy-duty Xerox beside me. She was a woman built of caffeine and cynicism. Someone who had seen every type of frantic customer at 3 in the morning. She glanced at my phone, reading the notification over my shoulder. She didn't gasp. She didn't ask if I was okay. She just let out a sharp, dry laugh. "That is not an invite, honey," she said, slamming the paper tray shut with a satisfying thud. "That is a subpoena." She was right, and that clarity cut through the fog of panic instantly. I looked at the timestamp. 2:14 in the morning. This was a classic tactic. I call it the narcissist's emergency. It's a strategy designed to bypass logic by manufacturing urgency. Mom's surgery was on Tuesday. Today was Friday. They had known about this for weeks, maybe months. Joint replacements aren't scheduled overnight. They had waited until the absolute last minute to fire the nurse, waited until the middle of the night to text me, specifically so I wouldn't have time to think. They wanted me groggy, scared, and reactive. They wanted me to feel like the only thing standing between my mother and suffering was my immediate compliance. If I reacted now, I was playing their game. If I rushed home, I was accepting the premise that my time, my job, and my life were less valuable than their bank balance. I didn't spiral. My pulse didn't even spike. I simply did the math. My hobby job, as he called it, paid $16 an hour, plus a night shift differential. It paid my rent. It bought my groceries. It kept the heat on in my drafty garage loft. My father was asking me to torch my financial stability to save him the cost of a professional salary. I wasn't a daughter to him right now. I was an asset he was trying to liquidate to cover a budget shortfall. I unlocked my phone. I didn't type out a paragraph explaining my feelings. I didn't remind him that we hadn't spoken in 2 years. I didn't ask about Mom's health, because if they actually cared about her health, they wouldn't have fired the medical professional. I typed 2 sentences. "No, I have a shift on Monday. Hire the nurse back." I hit send. Then, I swiped down and tapped the crescent moon icon. Do not disturb. The phone buzzed in my hand. A phantom echo of his rage, but the screen stayed dark. I placed it face down on the counter. I turned back to the stack of legal briefs waiting to be bound. I picked up the plastic comb binding, lined up the punched holes, and pulled the lever. The machine made a solid, mechanical crunch. It was the sound of order. It was the sound of a boundary snapping into place. I wasn't going home. I was going back to work. To understand why I could send that text and go back to work without my hands shaking, you have to understand the specific architecture of the house I grew up in. It wasn't a home built on love. It was a home built on hierarchy. For 20 years, I wasn't the black sheep. Black sheep get attention. They get yelled at. They get prayers and interventions. I was something else entirely. I was a glass child. A glass child is someone your parents look right through to see the people who actually matter. They looked through me to see the blinding success of my older sister, Jessica, or to worry about the constant, chaotic failures of my younger brother, Jacob. I was just the pane of glass in the middle necessary to keep the wind out, but completely invisible until I cracked. I cracked on my 20th birthday. That was 2.5 years ago. I remember sitting at the mahogany dining table. It was a Tuesday. I had bought my own cake from the grocery store, a small vanilla round with a single blue flower on it, and placed it in the center of the table. I sat there for 45 minutes, waiting, but nobody looked at the table. Jessica had just been promoted to some junior vice president role at her marketing firm. She was pacing the kitchen, loud and radiant, talking about her new salary and the corner office she was terrorizing an assistant to get. My father hung on her every word like she was delivering a sermon. He was practically glowing, reflecting her light. Then there was Jacob. Jacob had failed his driving test for the 3rd time that afternoon. He was sulking on the sofa, playing a video game at maximum volume. My mother was hovering over him, rubbing his back, murmuring that the instructor was biased and that he was still her special boy. And there I was, the utility player. I had a 4.0 GPA in my associate's program. I worked full-time. I paid for my own gas, my own insurance, and half the groceries in the fridge. But because I didn't have Jessica's shine or Jacob's neediness, I simply didn't exist. I watched them. I watched my father pour wine for Jessica. I watched my mother cut up an apple for Jacob. And I realized something that hit me harder than any scream could have. I wasn't a member of this family. I was the staff. I was the background noise that kept the house running so the main characters could have their drama. I didn't make a scene. I didn't flip the table. I just stood up, took the cake still in its plastic container, and walked out the back door. I went to my room and started packing. Not a suitcase, boxes. I moved out that night while they were all asleep. I loaded my hatchback with everything I owned, which wasn't much. I drove to a drafty garage loft I had found on Craigslist, a place with poor insulation and a landlord who demanded cash, but it had a lock on the door that only I controlled. For the first week, I checked my phone constantly. Part of me, the stupid, hopeful child part of me, thought they would notice. I thought I'd get a frantic call. "Where are you? We're so sorry. Come home." 1 week passed. Silence. It took 21 days for them to realize I was gone. And when the text finally came, it wasn't an apology. It wasn't a happy birthday. It wasn't even a, "Are you alive?" It was a text from my mother. "Emily, we can't find the vacuum cleaner. Did you take it? We have guests coming." That was it. They didn't miss me. They missed the appliance. They missed the labor. They missed the invisible force that kept their carpets clean. That was the moment the glass shattered. I realized my value to them was entirely calculated by what I could do for them, not who I was. So, when I blocked their numbers that day, I wasn't running away. I was quitting a job where I had never been paid. By Saturday morning, the wall of silence I had built with my Do Not Disturb setting began to crack. Not because I turned it off, but because the notifications were piling up so high they felt heavy in my pocket. My family realized I wasn't obeying the initial command, so they deployed the flying monkeys. First came the voicemails from Jessica. I didn't listen to them live, but I read the transcripts. Her tone leaked through the text. It wasn't a sister calling a sister. It was a manager disciplining an unruly employee. "Emily, this is unprofessional," the first one read. "Mom is in pain. I have a merger closing on Wednesday, and I cannot be wiping brows or managing medications. You need to step up and do your part. Stop being dramatic and pick up the phone." Note the language. Unprofessional. As if our family was a corporation, and I was failing my performance review. I have a merger. As if her career was a valid excuse to opt out of caregiving. But my job, the one that actually kept a roof over my head, was just a hobby I could discard. Then came the visual assault. My mother, who supposedly couldn't afford a nurse, managed to find her phone and text me a photo. It was a selfie from a hospital bed. She looked frail, her hair unbrushed, wearing a thin hospital gown. The lighting was terrible, clearly calculated to maximize the shadows under her eyes. The caption was a masterclass in passive aggression. I guess I just wasn't a good enough mother to earn a visit. I hope you're happy wherever you are. Finally, Jacob. My 22-year-old brother, who still lived at home rent-free. His text was short and pathetic. Dude, come home. There's no food in the fridge and Dad is yelling. I stood in the middle of my drafty garage loft, shivering. The temperature had dropped overnight, and the insulation in here was basically non-existent. I felt that old, familiar ache in my chest, the FOG. Fear, obligation, guilt. It's a toxic vapor that blinds you to reality. For a second, just a second, I wavered. I thought about the empty fridge. I thought about Mom in that gown. I thought about packing a bag. Then Caleb walked in. Caleb was my roommate. He worked nights as an EMT. He had seen car crashes, overdoses, and heart attacks. He knew what actual trauma looked like, and he knew what manipulation looked like. He saw me staring at my phone, my knuckles white, my breathing shallow. He didn't hug me. He didn't tell me it would be okay. He walked over to the kitchenette, poured a cup of coffee, and leaned against the counter. "If you go back," he said, his voice low and gravelly from lack of sleep, "who pays the rent here?" I looked up. "What?" "If you go back to nurse your mom for 3 months," he repeated. "Who pays your share of the rent?" "Because they won't. They wouldn't even pay for a nurse." The question cut through the emotional fog like a scalpel. He was right. If I left, I would lose my job. If I lost my job, I couldn't pay rent. If I couldn't pay rent, I would lose this loft. I would have nowhere to return to. I would be trapped in my childhood bedroom, dependent on them again, begging for gas money, erased from my own life. I looked at the phone again. Jessica's merger, Mom's guilt trip, Jacob's hunger. None of it was about love. It was about logistics. They had a problem. And they wanted me to be the solution, even if it cost me everything I had built. I put the phone down on the table. I walked over to the couch and picked up a thick wool blanket. I had bought it last winter with my own money. It cost $55. It was scratchy and smelled like cedar, but it was mine. I wrapped it around my shoulders, pulling it tight. The warmth hit me instantly. "I'm not going back," I told Caleb. "I'm staying right here." The next morning, I stopped treating my family like a family. I started treating them like a difficult client. In the print shop, when a customer comes in screaming that their deadline is impossible and their budget is zero, you don't cry. You don't argue. You look at the specs, you calculate the costs, and you offer a solution. If the client refuses the solution, that's on them. I sat down at my small desk in the loft, opened my laptop, and pulled up a fresh spreadsheet. Step 1. Due diligence. I called the hospital's main line. I didn't call my father or Jessica. I knew they would lie. I navigated the automated menu until I got a human in the orthopedic department. I used my helpful daughter voice, polite, concerned, slightly frazzled. "Hi, I'm checking on Susan Carter's admission time for Tuesday. We just wanted to confirm the pre-op instructions." The receptionist clicked away on her keyboard. "Oh, yes. Total knee replacement. She's scheduled for check-in at 6 a.m. "Right," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Back in August," the receptionist chirped. I hung up. August. It was January. They had known about this for 5 months. This wasn't a sudden crisis. This was a planned event. The emergency firing of the nurse was a manufactured cliffhanger designed to force me to jump. Rage flared up, hot and sharp, but I pushed it down. Rage is messy. Data is clean. Step 2. Sourcing vendors. I spent the next 2 hours researching home health agencies in my parents' zip code. I called 3 of them. I got availability. I got references. And most importantly, I got rates. I built a document. I didn't write a letter. I created a formal proposal. Option A, Helping Hands Agency, $25 an hour, available immediately. Option B, Elite Care, $30 an hour, specialized in orthopedic recovery. Option C, the Visiting Nurse Association, sliding scale based on income. I exported the file as a PDF. I named it Carter, Care, Options, V1, PDF. Then I did something that made my stomach turn. But I knew it was the only way to seal the deal. I checked my bank account. I had managed to save $950 over the last 2 years. It was my emergency fund. It was my car repair money. It was my if I get sick money. But this was an emergency. My freedom was on the line. I opened a new email draft addressed to my father. Dad, I wrote, I cannot come home. I have attached a list of 3 qualified agencies with immediate availability to assist Mom. To ensure there is no delay in her care, I am willing to pay the deposit for the first week of service from my own savings. Please let me know which agency you select so I can wire the funds directly to them. I read it over. It was cold. It was precise. It was undeniable. If they were truly broke, this solved the problem. If they truly needed help, this provided help. But I knew, deep down, that they didn't want a nurse. A nurse requires a paycheck. A nurse has labor rights. A nurse can quit. They wanted a daughter. I took a deep breath and clicked send. I had just offered to pay hundreds of dollars to stay away from them. And honestly, it felt like a bargain. While I waited for my father's inevitable explosion, Ryan decided to do some investigating of his own. Ryan was technically my boyfriend, but we hadn't put a label on it yet. He was a landscape architect student, steady, grounded, the kind of guy who understood that growth takes time and that you sometimes have to prune dead branches to save the tree. He knew my story. He knew why I flinched when people raised their voices. And he didn't trust my parents as far as he could throw a riding mower. I'm going to drive by, he had told me earlier that afternoon, just to see. Maybe they really are broke. Maybe the house is falling apart. I told him not to bother, but Ryan was stubborn in the quiet way that actually gets things done. 2 hours after I sent the email, my phone rang. Emily, he said. His voice sounded strange. Tight. Are you sitting down? I'm at work, I said, leaning against the collating table. What is it? Is the house okay? The house is fine, Ryan said. Better than fine. There's a contractor van in the driveway. Elite renovations. And a dumpster out front. My stomach dropped. A dumpster? Yeah, it's full of drywall and… Emily, is your bedroom window the one on the second floor, right corner? Yes, I whispered. I'm looking at it right now. The window is gone. They put in a bay window, and I can see inside because the lights are on. He paused, and I could hear the wind rushing through his phone. Emily, it's not a bedroom anymore. What do you mean? I see a treadmill, a Peloton bike, and a huge desk, mahogany. There's a framed diploma on the wall, the world tilted on its axis. That's Jessica's diploma, I said, my voice sounding like it was coming from underwater. They didn't fire the nurse because they were broke, Ryan said, the anger finally breaking through his calm demeanor. They fired the nurse because they spent the money on a remodel. They turned your room into a home gym and office for your sister. I closed my eyes. The image painted itself in my mind with sickening clarity. The fresh paint, the expensive equipment, the shrine to the golden child, built inside the corpse of my childhood sanctuary. They told me my room was waiting for me. I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. Dad said, come home. Your room is ready. It was a lie, Ryan said. Where were you going to sleep, Em? The answer was obvious. The couch. Or maybe the floor. They wanted me to come home, quit my job, and nurse my mother for free, while sleeping in the living room like a servant, just feet away from the luxury suite they had built for the sister who couldn't be bothered to visit. It wasn't just neglect anymore. It was exploitation. They had physically erased my place in the house. I wasn't a daughter returning to her nest. I was a temp worker, being summoned to a job site. Take a picture, I told Ryan. My voice was ice cold. Take a picture of the window. Send it to me. Already did, he said. My phone pinged. I opened the image. There it was. My old room, glowing with warm light, showcasing a sleek, expensive exercise bike where my twin bed used to be. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Because it was proof. It was the evidence that acquitted me of all guilt. I wasn't abandoning them. They had already evicted me. 10 minutes later, my phone lit up. It wasn't a text this time. It was a call. Dad Mobile. He was screaming before I even got the phone to my ear. Who do you think you are? His voice was so loud it distorted the speaker, crackling with static and rage. Sending me a price list? Offering to pay a deposit like we're some kind of charity case? Your mother is crying, Emily. She's crying because her own daughter sent her an invoice instead of coming home. I stood in the middle of the print shop. The machines were still humming, a steady, rhythmic thrum that grounded me. I didn't retreat to the break room. I didn't hide. I stood right there, under the harsh lights, holding the phone with a steady hand. I didn't send an invoice, Dad, I said. My voice was terrifyingly calm. It didn't sound like me. It sounded like a judge reading a verdict. I sent a solution. You said you couldn't afford a nurse. I solved that problem. We don't want a stranger, he shouted. We want family. We want you here, in your house, in your room, helping us get through this. My room, I repeated. Yes, your room. It's waiting for you. We kept it exactly how you left it. The lie hung in the air, thick and suffocating. He delivered it with such conviction. If Ryan hadn't driven by, if I hadn't seen the photo, I might have believed him. I might have believed that a sanctuary was waiting for me. I looked at the image on my screen again. The bay window, the mahogany desk, the expensive exercise bike. I saw the gym, Dad, I said. The silence on the other end was instantaneous. It was the sound of a vacuum sealing shut. I saw the Peloton, I continued, my voice flat. And the new bay window. Ryan drove by. He took pictures. It looks expensive. Definitely more expensive than a nurse's salary. That's just storage, he stammered, the bluster deflating into panic. We're just storing Jessica's things while she reorganizes her apartment. We can move it. We can put the bed back. Stop, I said. Just stop. I took a breath, and for the first time in my life, the math of our relationship made perfect sense. Do you know what the sunk cost fallacy is, Dad? I asked. What? What are you talking about? It's an economic principle. I explained, as if I were teaching a slow student. It's the mistake of continuing to invest in a failing project just because you've already spent a lot of time and money on it. You think that because I spent 18 years trying to earn your love, I'm trapped. You think I'll keep throwing good effort after bad debt because I'm afraid to walk away with nothing. I paused. I could hear him breathing, short, shallow breaths. But here's the thing about bad investments, I said. Smart investors don't chase them. They write them off. I spent 2 decades trying to be enough for you. I cleaned, I got good grades, I stayed quiet. I invested everything I had, and my return on investment was 0. Actually, it was negative. You erased me. Emily! You're being dramatic, he hissed, trying to regain control. You're our daughter. You owe us. I don't owe you anything. I cut him off. And I'm not coming back to sleep on a couch in a house where my bedroom was turned into a shrine for the sister who can't be bothered to visit you. You listen to me, he started, his voice rising again. No, I said. You listen. I have the photos, Dad. I have the pictures of the renovation. And I have the screenshots of your texts claiming you're broke. I let that sink in. If you call me again, I said, my voice dropping an octave. If you call my job, or my landlord, or send Jessica to leave me another voicemail, I will email those photos to every single person on the church prayer chain. I will show Pastor Miller exactly where the money for the poor sick mother fund went. I will show the neighbors why the ungrateful daughter really didn't come home. It was a low blow. It was dirty. It targeted the only thing they actually cared about, their reputation. You wouldn't, he whispered. Try me, I said. I'm not the glass child anymore, Dad. I'm the one holding the hammer. I pressed the red button and ended the call. That night, I did 3 things. First, I blocked every number associated with the name Carter. Dad, Mom, Jessica, Jacob, even the house landline. One by one, I sent them to the void. Second, I transferred the $950, the money I had almost thrown away on their deposit, back into my savings account. Actually, I took out $200 of it. I bought a new space heater for the loft. A good one. One that actually kept the cold out. And third, I sat on the floor with Ryan and Caleb, eating cheap takeout under the glow of the heater coils. I looked around at the drafty walls, the mismatched furniture, and the people who had shown up for me without being asked. They wanted a nurse. They wanted a maid. They wanted a ghost. But ghosts don't answer the phone. I printed out the photo Ryan took of the bay window, and I taped it to the wall above my desk. Not as a reminder of what I lost, but as a reminder of what I escaped. If you've ever had to fire your own family to save your sanity, share this story. You aren't alone.